And I would really like at some point. I don't know. I'm sure they're gonna do it at some point. You have to do it. I would just really like to see Sam in his full outfit with the shield, and old man Steve, just sort of pop up on screen and recognize him. I think that would be a really
Yeah.
cool moment.
I do want to see, them meet up again at some point. I just don't know like what the appropriate place is for that. Now,
I
some
don't either.
people,
I don't
yeah.
either.
Now, I want to talk about Isaiah and that last scene with him next. But I heard a couple people say like they thought, oh, that scene might have been better if Old Man Steve would have shown up, and but I actually disagree with that because I don't think that was about Steve at all.
No.
It would have been like kind of tonally weird maybe if he would have showed up. Like I don't think it was appropriate. So in that scene, first he goes to Isaiah's house, right?
Right.
And he has that, and they kind of talk in the backyard there, and Isaiah's like picking up the huge like trees and like moving them around, and Sam's talking to him, and Isaiah's like, shit, you almost got me with that. And he does admit that Sam's got something special and everything. So like, how did that scene hit you, and like, what did you think about that?
Oh man, I really liked it. So I really liked it. I really liked that scene at the end, and I always find it interesting how in trailers they will literally give us shots from the most impactful moments of the series, right? So that shot of Sam sitting on the steps, we got that in the early trailer.
That's true.
We just didn't know what the context was. So that backyard scene was awesome. I really liked the backyard scene, and you're right. I had seen also conversations about, hey, if they do this museum scene, wouldn't it be so awesome for Steve to show up and to hand Isaiah the shield, or to show up and acknowledge Isaiah, right? Because technically, if we're not going off the moniker and we're going off the abilities, Isaiah Bradley in the comics comes before Steve. Steve comes after Isaiah Bradley, right? So it would have been a cool, sort of fan moment, but I think it all depended on how they framed it. If they had framed it in a different way where, Isaiah Bradley is walking through the museum and seeing all these images of Steve, and he's seeing people talk about Steve and love Steve, and then Sam showed him, his sort of section, I could see how it would have been sort of cool to have Steve be there, but like you said, tonally, it would have just been an interruption. I think, in that moment, to have Sam, be the guy that, because it's about Sam, right? It's about Sam, it's about Isaiah, and it's also about having his grandson Elijah there as well. Because we know that somewhere down the road we may see him, in a possible Young Avengers team up. I think they did a pretty good job throughout the whole series, really placing him and Sam in this sort of cool relationship. When Sam first shows up to talk to Isaiah with the shield, they have that little interaction, and Eli's like, I'll be back there, and Sam's like, oh, okay. So they sort of have that sort of cool back and forth. So I think the way they framed it, I think the way that scene went was perfect. They didn't spend too much time in it to where it was awkward, to where it could fall flat. And I don't think Steve was needed at all. It would have been cool maybe, but I think it would have really taken away from the significance of Sam being a new black Captain America, finally giving Isaiah and his black regiment due. I think it was perfect.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And Carl Lumbly, who played Isaiah Bradley in this, man, he's so good.
He's so good. He's so
good. And I just thought, and Anthony Mackie's so good too. And so I really felt emotion in these scenes with them. It's like, I can't say that I can relate to everything that Isaiah's been through or Sam or anything, but like, they acted the hell out of this scene, and I think you really feel it. And it seemed like Sam honored Isaiah and what he had been through without breaking his promise. Because I don't get the impression he was like, and Isaiah's alive and he lives over here, So he like respected Isaiah's wishes, but at the same time was able to like honor him and like do this. And maybe that's a step, in a direction that can make things in the present a little bit better for Isaiah, at least, in his own mind, if nothing else.
Yep, and and they left the door wide open, right? They don't come out and say that, there is no exposition that says, hey, Sam went to the government and told him about, Isaiah
Right.
Bradley's, existence, and that he lives here, and he needs to be remembered in this way, right? They sort of left that door wide open as to how it takes place, but I do think something we're supposed to walk away from that scene with is, as Captain America, Sam does have a bit of sway now.
Yeah.
I'm sure it took a bit of sway to get that there in that museum. So, I think that's our first sort of indicator of the newfound respect and sort of status he may hold.
Yeah, it's interesting because, first, I think maybe the first thing that happens is like he brings that pilot down onto the bridge and protects him with the wings and the shield when the helicopter like bumps him. And and that was awesome because like the people on the bridge are like, yeah, blah. And he gets that like, hero cheer moment. And then, of course, when he lands and he goes through that whole speech, like he's like on live TV as that's happening. And so I think that he's earned like a big, like huge amount of like public support, right?
Yeah. I agree.
This is something that like now the government can't be like, oh, give us the shield, because A, they don't even own it to begin with, right? B, it's probably known by somebody at this point that Steve actually gave it to Sam, I would imagine. And so like also like just from a PR perspective, because like I'm kind of cynical about all the government people, like they almost like have to support him. Like you can imagine like some figures here and there, like saying something about him, but like overall, you're right. I think he's got that clout now as Captain America to where he has some pull in all of that. And so, maybe that played into him being able to get that exhibit. And that's a real interesting thing that I hope they get into, like, whenever we see Sam next, right?
Yeah, and I would imagine that, what is the Don Cheadle-led show we're going to be getting next year? Is it going to be Armor Wars?
I think.
Yeah, Armor Wars. So I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing Sam again in Armor Wars. I would expect so.
Yeah, even if he just shows up for a minute, right?
Yeah, just briefly.
Probably.
Just briefly.
Yeah, that'll be really cool. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of stuff, and so